You didn't think I was going to let you off that easy, did you? I'm not near done talking. We were just talking about Amazon. Mr. Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon and who also owns a little side business called Blue Origin. You know, rocket ship ride to outer space and back. Well, I'm glad we kind of brought up outer space because this is kind of the perfect segue to what I want to talk about next. And before I talk about it, it's going to be about the Apollo 11. But before I go to Apollo 11, I want to say one real quick thing about Artemis. I won't bore you, it's kind of fun, and then I'll go on. Okay? I mean, Apollo was man on the moon. All right? Apollo was the Apollo Greek god. I think it was Greek. Anyway, all right. Now, what is different about Artemis compared to Apollo? Artemis is going to put the first woman on the moon. A woman. So they named the whole project Artemis because Artemis was Apollo's sister, who is a woman. So they're putting a woman on the moon, and they named the project after a woman. All right, that's all. I'm off my soapbox right now. I want to talk about a little project called Apollo 11, 1969, first man on the moon. If you knew all of the crap that went on, everything that went wrong, it's amazing. And you would find it amazing that those guys landed on the moon and came back alive and in one piece. I still can't believe it. Let me explain. First thing we need to talk about, though, before we talk about the actual mission to the moon, is that big mainframe high speed computer NASA used to use. I mean, the computer was about 5 feet long, 3 feet wide, and weighed something like 50, 60, 70 pounds. And its memory, in memory, it could store almost 33,000 bits of information. Think about that. 33,000 bits. Not megabytes, not gigabytes, just bytes. 33,000. Now, for people who aren't real computer conversant, that would record 33,000 bytes. That would record about 2 seconds of your favorite song. So I could just see NASA going up to today's astronauts and saying, hey, we're going to put you on 9 million pounds of thrust, and we're going to send you 250,000 miles away from Earth, and you're going to be able to listen to any song you want to listen to on the way, as long as it's not more than 2 seconds long. And I mean, what would the astronauts say today if they heard that? They would say, there is no way you're putting me on a 9 million pounds of thrust, sending me to the moon with a computer that has got 33,000 bytes of memory to it. But that's what the Apollo 11 guys did. And you know what? They were proud of that computer, man. That was one of the best computers going at the time. And that was going to take us to the moon. Oh, Okay, so that was the computer. We're now in orbit around the moon. The lunar lander is getting ready to detach from the orbiter. They're at about 63 miles above the moon, and they're planning on about a 17-minute trip from where they are to landing. 17 minutes, and they're the first humans to ever land on another planet. Wow. And I can remember listening to it. I was driving in the car. I mean, me and 650,000 other people were listening to it, but they didn't hear this stuff. First thing they did is they detached from the orbiter. Okay? All of a sudden, the lander could no longer talk to Houston. And why could they no longer talk to Houston? Because the antenna that was folded up alongside wasn't pointing at Earth. And so what did they do? Did they tell this high-speed computer, hey, point the antenna at the Earth, or, it should do it automatically? No, that computer was overwhelmed already with guidance and other factors running the whole mission. So what did they do? Neil Armstrong goes to the back and he cranks the antenna so it points at the Earth so they could talk to Houston as they come in for a landing. That's great. I'm in a space capsule around the moon and I gotta crank the antenna to get it to line up. Yikes. All right, so now they are descending and they start off at about 5,000 miles an hour. And then 5 minutes into the landing procedure, so they started with 17 to go, 5 minutes into the landing, so they're at 12 minutes, they get an error code pop up on their digital readout. And it says 12:02. And Neil kind of looks at Buzz, and Buzz looks at Neil, and they both go, oh, what's that? So they call down to Houston, and they tell Houston, we've got this error code, 12:02. And Houston goes, uh, uh, we'll get back to you. And some very smart 26-year-old engineer pulled out the manual, looked up 12:02 because nobody knew what it was, and it said the computer is being overloaded. OMG. This high-speed mega computer is being overloaded. And we didn't even ask it to crank the antenna. And so it's like, why is it being overloaded? And they figured out, this same guy figured out that when it was on the ground in going through tests on the ground, they had a computer that was working, a command box that worked the guidance system on the Apollo. And then they had another controller that worked the radar on the lander that was used to point up at the orbiter when they returned back. And that's how they found it. They turned the radar. So this computer was working this control box on the ground that was working both the guidance system and the radar. But to make it safer for the actual landing, they broke up the controller into two separate controllers in case one failed, the other one would still be working. And it was like, oh my God, the computer is freaking out because now, OMG, it's got two controllers. I mean, count them 1, 2 controllers to operate, not just one. And it's being overloaded. But they decide, well, we can still continue under these circumstances. So what did they do? They told them, just reach up, flip the switch, and turn the warning off. Make it go back to 0. Now think about that. They're in a capsule heading towards the moon for the first time. Man is going to land on a foreign planet. They got a warning signal, and they just, oh well, we'll just flip that off for now. Okay. So as they continued in their descent, what happens is that warning goes off 3 more times. All right. And every time they just flick it off. Now, because that computer was being overloaded, running 2 controllers, it figured out the landing wrong. As a matter of fact, the computer overshot the landing by 7 kilometers, 3 point some miles. So now they're landing, warnings are going off, and they don't have any idea what the landing site looks like that they're heading for, that the computer's heading them for. And so what do? Okay, when we get to the landing site, let's look at the landing site and see what it looks like. Because they had another function on board the craft. It's not an aircraft, there's no air, the craft, and it was called bingo. If they came in for a landing and visually they did not like the landing site the computer was taking them to, Neil Armstrong could flick off the computer guidance and manually fly the lander in for landing. And he had 3 minutes of fuel to do that. And they called that 3-minute deadline bingo. In other words, he had 3 minutes to land that after he was supposed to land at the first site. Otherwise, at bingo, if they weren't down on the moon, they had to go back up to the orbiter and come back home with their heads down, going, gee golly, well, we got close, but we hit bingo and we weren't on the ground. So you know that these guys are going to do everything in their mind to land this craft. I keep saying aircraft. I'm a pilot. So they're coming in, and sure enough, they're coming in and they're looking out the window to see what the parking lot looks like where they're supposed to land, and it's full of boulders. It's covered in boulders. So Neil Armstrong does what he's supposed to do and practice to do. He switches off the guidance system and he takes control and starts flying the lander manually. Now remember, he's got 3 minutes until he hits bingo and has to go back up to the orbiter. So he has to be on the ground. He has to find somewhere to land in 3 minutes. And they've already overshot the good landing spot by 3.5 miles, 7 kilometers. So he takes over control and he continues his slow descent as they watch out the window. And you can hear Houston, it's deathly quiet in Houston because they know they've got 3 minutes. Houston decides they're not going to say anything to interfere with the landing procedure because Neil Armstrong's got plenty to be thinking about on his own, and he knows what he's supposed to do. So they go on, and first thing Houston says, 2.5 minutes to bingo. And they continue on. 2 minutes to bingo. And they continue on. 1.5 minutes to bingo. And don't you know, every butt in Houston cannot get their finger up their butt because they're so tight listening to what's going on this landing. And they continue. 1 minute to bingo. And they're all going, Neil, please land. 30 seconds to bingo. Tick, 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 tick. Houston, this is Tranquility Base. The Eagle has landed. He had 17 seconds left of fuel when he landed. I mean, don't you know that man has got ice water in his veins? But now the interesting part about it kind of is the whole time he's flying, the fuel is sloshing around inside the lander as they're counting down. So when they land and the fuel finally settles still, it turns out that they had a whole 45 seconds of fuel before bingo, not 17. But still, think about the difference between landing and not landing on the moon was the difference of, in their mind, 17 seconds. All right? 17 seconds. So they land, and the only other thing that I want to talk about is Neil Armstrong. Oh, Neil Armstrong, by the way, turning it, his heart rate was 155. I mean, I guess he was a little bit nervous. I mean, I'm not sure why, but I mean, that seems to indicate he was a little bit nervous coming in for a landing. And the only other thing, I mean, he was the right guy at the right time, but he admitted later he did screw up his little speech when he put his first foot on the moon. When he said, "This is one small step for man." No, it wasn't one small step for man. It was one small step for a man. And then it was one giant leap for mankind. But you know what? I think I can forgive him. I mean, after what he did to safely land that on the moon, to this day, he's my hero.